What happens when a CEO realizes his company is falling apart, but no one is telling him the truth? In this Undercover CEO story, Nathan Cross, the head of a major aerospace company, discovers rising defect rates, safety violations, and employees quitting in frustration. But instead of relying on secondhand reports, he makes a bold move. He goes undercover as a factory worker to see the real problems himself. What he finds is worse than he imagined. A ruthless manager is overworking employees, forcing them to approve faulty aircraft parts and ignoring safety risks that could cost lives. But Nathan isn't just here to observe, he's here to fix it. The moment he reveals his identity, everything changes. From firing the corrupt leader to rebuilding trust with his employees. This is the story of a CEO who didn't just sit behind a desk. He walked the factory floor, took action, and transformed his company from the inside out. Stay tuned, because this Undercover CEO story will show you what real leadership looks like. Nathan Cross leaned back in his sleek office chair, staring at the latest reports on his tablet. The numbers painted a grim picture. Product defect rates were rising, shipments were delayed, and more engineers were resigning than ever before. Orion Aerospace had built its reputation on precision engineering, providing cutting-edge spacecraft components and aircraft technology, but now customers were complaining about faulty parts, and several major airline manufacturers had threatened to pull contracts. Nathan's stomach twisted. How had things gone so wrong? His COO, Elliot Graves, had repeatedly reassured him that these were temporary setbacks, blaming supply chain disruptions and lazy workers for the production slowdown. But something didn't sit right. Nathan had built Orion Aerospace from the ground up, and he knew the quality of his engineers. If they were leaving in droves, there had to be a reason. One that Elliot and his reports weren't telling him. His suspicions deepened when an anonymous employee complaint landed on his desk. The letter detailed severe understaffing, forced overtime without extra pay, and safety violations being ignored at one of their largest manufacturing plants. The writer warned that workers were being pressured to rush production, leading to dangerous mistakes in aircraft components. Nathan clenched his jaw. If this was true, not only was his company at risk, it could endanger lives. He exhaled sharply and set the report down. He had been running Orion Aerospace from behind a desk for too long, trusting reports and spreadsheets instead of seeing the reality on the ground. If he wanted real answers, he needed to see the factory floor himself, not as the CEO, but as one of the workers. His mind raced with a plan. Orion Aerospace was big enough that most assembly workers wouldn't recognize him in person, especially with a well-placed disguise. He would go undercover, working alongside his employees to find out what was really happening. Determined, Nathan pulled out his phone and made a call. "I need a new ID badge," he said. "Make it for a junior technician, no CEO privileges." He was going into the field. Alone. Nathan Cross adjusted his faded work overalls in the cracked bathroom mirror of a gas station just a few miles from Orion Aerospace's largest manufacturing plant. Gone was his tailored suit and polished shoes. Now he looked like any other blue-collar worker stepping in for a long shift. He pulled a baseball cap low over his face, tucked his ID badge into his pocket, and took a deep breath. If his employees were suffering, he was about to find out firsthand. Walking through the factory gates, Nathan was met with a deafening hum of machinery and the metallic scent of freshly welded steel. Conveyor belts carried aircraft components through dimly lit assembly lines, where workers moved with strained expressions and exhausted postures. It didn't take long for him to notice the tension in the air. There was no casual chatter, no energy, just pure exhaustion. At orientation, the shift supervisor barely looked at him, handing him a work order with a grunt. "You're on line 3. Don't slow us down. No introductions, no welcome, just a reminder that he was expected to work fast and keep quiet." As he made his way to the line, he spotted Derek Nolan, the plant manager, barking orders at a technician. "I don't care if the part is misaligned, just send it through. We don't have time for perfection." Nathan's jaw clenched. That part would go into a commercial aircraft. One mistake could mean disaster. His first task was assembling hydraulic stabilizers for a new fleet of commercial jets. A man next to him, Jake Ramirez, glanced at him and smirked. "You new?" Nathan nodded. "Yeah, first day." Jake chuckled. Welcome to hell. Nathan worked carefully, mimicking the movements of those around him. But when he double-checked his work, Jake nudged him. Don't take too long, man. Derek will have your head. Nathan frowned, but said nothing. Were they being forced to ignore quality control? Hours passed, and it became clear workers were underpaid, overworked, and afraid to speak up. A young woman, Sarah Lynn, was running the quality control station. When she hesitated on a faulty stabilizer, Derek appeared behind her. Stamp it and move on, or I'll find someone who will. Sarah swallowed hard and approved it. Nathan's stomach twisted. By the end of his shift, Nathan had seen enough to confirm his worst fears. This plant wasn't just inefficient, it was dangerous, and he wasn't leaving until he fixed it. Nathan wiped the sweat from his forehead as he tightened the last bolt on a hydraulic stabilizer, his muscles aching from hours of repetitive labor. His shift had barely started, but exhaustion was already creeping in, a feeling that seemed all too familiar for the workers around him. He glanced at Jake, who moved with the kind of mechanical precision that only came from years of experience. Yet there was no pride in his work, only a sense of resignation. You always run short-staffed like this? Nathan asked in a low voice. Jake exhaled sharply. Yeah, management keeps hiring, but no one sticks around. Either they quit or Derek runs them into the ground. Nathan had suspected mistreatment, but the reality was far worse. He saw employees skipping breaks to meet quotas, rushing delicate assembly work under pressure, and cutting corners just to keep up. Mistakes were inevitable, but instead of fixing them, management forced workers to look the other way. At the quality control station, Sarah Lynn's face was tight with stress as she reviewed a batch of stabilizers. Nathan approached her casually, pretending to adjust his gloves. Everything holding up okay? She scoffed. If by holding up you mean I'm signing off on defective parts because I don't want to get fired, then sure. She tapped a worn-out clipboard. Last week we had 3 near accidents because components were out of alignment. I filed reports. Guess where they went? Nathan already knew the answer. Nowhere. As if to prove her point, a loud metallic screech echoed through the factory. A worker at a press machine stumbled backward, his eyes wide as the hydraulic arm jammed mid-separation, sending sparks flying. The man barely avoided injury, but Derek Nolan stormed over, furious. Not about the safety issue, but the delay it caused. Get that thing running again now, he shouted. The worker, still shaken, hesitated. Sir, I think the actuator is failing. If we don't fix it, I said now, Derek cut him off. Nathan felt his pulse quicken. A failing actuator wasn't just a minor defect. It could cause catastrophic failure in flight. That was the moment Nathan knew this wasn't just a problem of mismanagement. It was outright negligence, and it was endangering lives. He wasn't just dealing with poor leadership. He was dealing with a crisis that could destroy his company if left unchecked. His disguise had given him a front-row seat to the rot festering inside his own factory. Now, he had to decide how to expose it. Nathan had seen enough. The factory was a disaster waiting to happen, but the true breaking point came during his next shift. A batch of stabilizers had failed inspection. Again. Sarah Lynn stood at her station, arms crossed, shaking her head. These aren't passing. If we send them out like this, we're asking for trouble. Jake Ramirez, standing beside her, nodded in agreement. We've already had 3 recalls this quarter. If these fail in the air, he didn't need to finish the sentence. Before they could escalate the issue, Derek Nolan stormed in, his face twisted with irritation. Why the hell are we at a standstill? Move the damn parts! Sarah stood her ground. Sir, these stabilizers don't meet safety standards. Derek rolled his eyes. They're close enough. The airlines won't notice. And if they do, that's what maintenance checks are for. Nathan's fists clenched at the sheer recklessness of the statement. Jake stepped forward, voice firm. We can't sign off on these. It's a liability. Do I look like I care? Derek snapped. You're not here to think, Ramirez. You're here to do your damn job. Silence hung in the air. Nathan saw it in Jake's face, the quiet fury of a man who had swallowed this treatment for too long. Sarah looked ready to walk out. The other workers were frozen, watching, waiting to see if anyone would fight back. Nathan took a slow step forward. His voice was calm but unwavering. You're asking them to send out defective aircraft parts. That's more than just reckless. It's criminal. Derek turned on him instantly, sneering. Who the hell do you think you are, new guy? You don't get a say in how this place runs. Nathan didn't hesitate. He reached up and removed his cap, his expression now cold and sharp. "Actually," he said, locking eyes with Derek, "I do." The room fell into absolute silence. Jake's eyes widened. Sarah took a small step back. The realization hit Derek like a freight train. His face drained of color as he recognized the man standing in front of him. Nathan squared his shoulders. "I'm Nathan Cross, CEO of Orion Aerospace. And you're done here." The weight of his words crashed over the entire floor. The workers, who had been too scared to speak, were suddenly no longer alone. Derek stumbled back, opening and closing his mouth like a fish out of water. He knew he was finished. Nathan had seen enough, and now he was going to fix it. The factory floor remained eerily silent as Derek Nolan stood frozen, his face pale and his confidence shattered. The workers, once fearful of retaliation, now stared at Nathan with a mixture of shock and hope. Derek, however, was still grasping at straws. "Sir, this is just a misunderstanding," he stammered, his voice suddenly much less commanding. Nathan didn't give him a chance to spin another lie. "Security," he called out, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Within moments, 2 security guards arrived. "Escort Mr. Nolan off the premises immediately. He's fired, effective now." Derek's bravado collapsed completely. He sputtered in disbelief. "You can't just—" "I can, and I just did," Nathan cut him off. "You've been endangering lives, exploiting workers, and running this plant into the ground. You're lucky I'm not calling the authorities." As security dragged Derek away, a slow ripple of movement spread through the employees. Relief, shock, and a newfound sense of possibility. Nathan turned to the stunned crowd. "I owe you all an apology," he said, his voice steady. "This company was built on precision and integrity, and I let it fall apart. That ends today." A murmur ran through the workers as Nathan continued. "First, we're conducting an immediate safety audit. No more cutting corners, no more forcing through defective parts. If it doesn't meet standards, it doesn't leave this plant." He looked at Sarah. "You're in charge of quality control now. No more interference from management." Sarah's eyes widened. "Me?" "You're the only one I trust to do it right," Nathan said simply. She swallowed hard, then nodded with determination. Nathan turned to Jake. "You're the interim plant manager. You stood up when it mattered. Now I need you to help rebuild this place the right way." Jake blinked, stunned. I don't know if I—" "You care. That's more than I can say for your predecessor," Nathan said. Jake exhaled deeply, then nodded. "I won't let you down." Nathan looked at the factory workers. "No more unpaid overtime. No more intimidation. You deserve better. And I'm staying here until we fix this together." For the first time, the air in the plant felt lighter. The fear was gone. Real change had begun. In the weeks that followed, the entire atmosphere at the factory transformed. Nathan made good on his promise. He didn't just issue orders from his office. He was on the ground, overseeing every change himself. The first priority was safety. Engineers and technicians were given time to properly inspect and test components, and an independent safety audit team was brought in to review every step of the manufacturing process. Faulty parts were removed and replaced, no exceptions. Next came workforce reforms. Nathan adjusted scheduling policies, ensuring no more forced overtime or unfair hour reductions. Workers were paid for every minute they worked, and wages were increased to reflect the skill and effort required for aerospace manufacturing. Employee retention improved almost overnight. Instead of quitting, people wanted to stay, knowing they were finally valued. With Derek Nolan gone, Jake Ramirez stepped into his new role as plant manager. The transition wasn't easy, but his leadership was built on respect, not fear. He listened to workers, found solutions instead of assigning blame, and ensured the plant was running efficiently without compromising quality. Sarah Lynn, now in charge of quality control, held the highest standards yet, rejecting anything that wasn't flawless. Customer complaints plummeted, defect rates dropped significantly, and the company regained its reputation for excellence. Major airline clients who had been on the verge of cutting ties renewed their contracts, impressed by the transparency and reforms. One afternoon, as Nathan reviewed progress reports in his office at the factory, Jake and Sarah approached him, carrying a small box. "From all of us," Jake said, setting it down. Nathan opened it to find a custom-made plaque from the factory workers. The inscription was simple: "Thank you for listening." Nathan ran a hand over the engraved words, a rare warmth spreading in his chest. For years he had focused on numbers, contracts, and growth. But this was his real success. He had rebuilt not just a factory, but trust. Nathan sat in the break room of the factory, a place he had once never imagined himself spending time in. The scent of metal and grease still lingered in the air, but for the first time, the energy inside felt lighter, hopeful. Workers chatted freely, laughter echoed from the assembly lines, and there was a sense of pride in the work being done. The factory wasn't perfect yet, but it was finally on the right track. He ran a finger over the engraved words on the plaque he had received. "Thank you for listening." Simple, but heavier than anything he had ever read in a business report. For years he had trusted numbers and spreadsheets, believing that if the bottom line looked good, the company was fine. But people weren't numbers. No report could have shown him what was really happening inside his own company. Only being here, working beside them, had given him the truth. Jake walked over and leaned against the counter. "You know, a month ago, I was ready to quit," he admitted. "Figured nothing would ever change?" Nathan looked at him, seeing not just an employee, but a leader. "And now?" he asked. Jake exhaled, glancing out at the bustling floor. "Now? I actually want to be here." A small smirk crossed his face. "And I don't have to fight every day just to do my job right." Nathan nodded, feeling a sense of satisfaction he hadn't felt in years. He had thought running a company meant staying in an office, making big decisions from afar. Now he knew better. Leadership wasn't just about profit margins and production quotas. It was about people, and the only way to truly understand what they needed was to be there, standing beside them, listening. As he stood up, he knew his work wasn't done. There were still other plants to visit, other managers to investigate, but this time he wouldn't be doing it from behind a desk. Nathan stepped out onto the factory floor, rolling up his sleeves, because real leadership wasn't about watching from above. It was about walking with the people who built the company from the ground up. The story of Nathan Cross highlights a fundamental truth about leadership. A company is only as strong as the people who build it. For too long, Nathan relied on reports, trusting numbers over the experiences of his employees. But leadership isn't just about strategy and profits. It's about understanding the struggles of the workforce and creating an environment where people are valued. By going undercover, Nathan witnessed firsthand the consequences of poor management. Overworked employees, safety risks, and a culture of fear. Had he continued to ignore the warning signs, not only would his company have suffered, but lives could have been at risk. Real leadership requires visibility, accountability, and action. The story teaches that success is not just about efficiency and profits, but about integrity and trust. Employees who feel heard and respected are more committed to their work, which directly impacts the quality of a company's products and services. Ultimately, Nathan learned that a true leader doesn't just sit behind a desk. They walk the factory floor, listen, and take action. A business thrives not because of policies on paper, but because of the people who bring it to life every day.